only appropriate greeting is, He is risen.
He is risen indeed. Hallelujah.
Good. We will use that several times during the service, but that is the greeting that the church uses during the Easter season. And as Lent was 6 weeks, where Sunday was in Lent but not of Lent, excuse me, in Easter we have 7 weeks. We have to do more than Lent. So we celebrate for 7 weeks, and we continue to bask in the light of the resurrection. So that the lessons for this week are lessons that continue with the resurrection story and talk about the significance of what has happened because Jesus died and rose again. And that will be basically our theme throughout the Lenten period, but particularly in these first weeks after Easter. So, if you will take a moment to say good morning to each other. This lesson has so many different parts and aspects to it that we cannot begin to cover all of them. But let me just talk about some of them. This lesson is, in one sense, a marvelous description of who we are. We live with all kinds of fears. We live with all kinds of worries. Will the economy get better? Will our health get better? Will our friends keep on dying? Some of that may get better, some of that may not. Our friends will keep on dying. So we gather in our own minds, sort of behind our own locked doors, trying to scurry about our lives, trying to find some way to make it through from one day to the next. The disciples were doing that, and they're perhaps panic-stricken about, they just killed our leader, now will they come after us? They have their own set of fears, and into that fear, behind locked doors, appears Jesus. The response that Jesus gave to the disciples could have been, fine lot of friends you guys were. You all left. Right when I needed you most. You took off. Does not do anything like that. Instead says, peace be with you, and shows them the wounds that cost him his life. Peace comes from those wounds. Then says peace again, to say, in that peace, now you are being sent out to live in the same fashion that God the Father sent me. Go be people who forgive. I just forgave you for running away in terror. You didn't deserve it. Yes, you did that. You did run. Now, go live that same way with the people around you. Thomas wasn't there. Now we give Thomas this label of doubting Thomas. Are you a doubting Thomas? And we use that as a term to suggest that, again, we're sort of ninnies, that we don't quite get our act together, and we're worse than being just from Missouri. We don't believe anything or anybody. But when Thomas says, I'm not going to believe unless I see the mark of the nails and can touch them and touch those wounds, he's not asking for any more than what Jesus already gave the rest of the disciples. And Thomas wasn't such a jerk. In chapter 11, after the raising of Lazarus, and it has become clear that because of that raising of Lazarus, then they're trying to kill Jesus. And Jesus says, well, let's go back now to Judea, around Jerusalem. And Thomas is the one who says, they're going to kill him. Let's go with him so we can die with him. He is not someone who, oh man, I don't like this job, I don't want this. He is one who says, I know what's going on, but he wants to see. Imagine that we haven't had 2,000 years of people greeting each other at this time of year with Christ is risen indeed, hallelujah. Imagine that you don't have any of that, and someone comes up to you and says, Carol, you know what? Jesus that we were running around with, I saw him, he's alive. How many of your friends are going to say, are not going to say, what have you been smoking? Thomas wants not to be played for a fool. He wants to know what's really going on. So, a week later, Jesus shows up. He doesn't read Thomas the riot act for being a doubting Thomas. He greets that group, now including Thomas, with the same peace that he had offered to the group prior. He includes Thomas in that peace and says, Thomas, here I am, touch me. And then he goes on. Thomas gives the description of Jesus that is found nowhere in the gospel. My Lord and my God. Spells it out. There could have been a lot of other responses to who Jesus was. Peter had said, I'll go anywhere with you, and then hightailed it out of there in trouble times. Caiaphas had decided that this guy needed to go. It would be better that he die rather than that the whole nation end up in revolution and too many people get killed. There could be almost any kind of, there still are almost any kinds of responses to who Jesus is, but Thomas lays it out as my Lord and my God. And Jesus goes on to say, you believe because you saw. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Why does John write those words down? Except to say, in his late first century writing, I'll bet you that there are lots of people saying, you gotta be wacky. Nobody gets out of the grave. It just doesn't happen. And so he's saying, blessed are we readers down the road, generation after generation, who do catch on and can say, Christ is risen, he is risen indeed, hallelujah. And that we become people who, having received that peace that enables us to go out and to live and to forgive, that we are people who demonstrates who the risen Christ really is and what has happened. Then John concludes his gospel.